This is a 16-part series showing 16 different legendary builds on all 3 classes, all 5 subclasses. I'll be using 16 different exotic armors, 16 different exotic weapons, and 32 different legendary weapons, along with 0 artifact mods. And I will be showing these builds applied over 16 different solo flawless legendary missions. The playlist will be on my channel, dim links will be in the description, and if you enjoy the content, please let me know by leaving a like, a comment, subbing, all that good stuff. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy and let's get into it. Alright, welcome back to part 5 of my legendary build series. I'm on Gunslinger doing a Ophidia Spathe knife trick build, and basically this build lets me set off instant ignitions if I have targets that are beefy enough to absorb 2 knife tricks. Then the ignition goes off and I clear out a bunch of ads, and the fragments that I'm using are all feeding into my melee and to ignitions, as well as giving me radiant and restoration. So basically there's lots of different builds that you can use with Gunslinger for ad clear. Ophidia Spathe was one of the first exotics I got for Gunslinger, and I just put it on and started playing with it, and I've always really enjoyed the build. There's not too many other exotics that give you super easy ignitions on demand, and so basically the way it works is with double knife charges, you can use any knife you want, but I like knife trick the best because it's easy to deploy, it's quick, you don't need any precision hits, there's no there's no big animation to winding up your throw and releasing. You just toss out three blades all at once, and if you're close enough to target, you can hit them with all 3. Each blade does 20 scorched stacks. I think it might be 15 at base, plus 50% with Ember of Ashes, which I am using. I pretty much use that on all my solar builds for all classes, just because 50% more scorch is 50% more damage, which means you're also going to be hitting that 100 scorch stack ignition threshold much more frequently with Ember of Ashes. But basically, with Ember of Ashes, if you hit 2 knife tricks on a single target, even if 2 of the 3 blades hit and you miss 1 or 2 here or there, you're still going to pretty much reliably set off an ignition. And it has a short cooldown too, so if I do lose my knife for whatever reason, there is that bonus with fairly good cooldown on knife trick. But it's not really something that I would never choose knife trick because it has a shorter cooldown. It's just the better option for me for this build. It's not just good at setting ignitions off on beefy targets, but it's also good for waves of ads, because the knife trick itself is you kind of compare it to a waveform grenade launcher. Instead of it being like a precision based single knife throw where if you miss you're screwed, you just send out this wide splay of 3 knives. You're pretty much guaranteed to hit something. And using that with the fragment that gives you radiant. Which one's that? Ember of Torches? I can't remember. But it can be pretty easy to proc radiant. And so with the aspects knock them down, basically you get a free refund on your knife on every kill. And even with Ophidia Spathe, you can sometimes get both your knives refunded for free. Like if you're down to your last knife and you get a kill, sometimes it'll refund both knives. If you set off an ignition and kill something, it'll give you a refund. And so with that said, one thing that you might want to consider is when you do toss out a knife trick and the enemy doesn't die right away, if their health is low enough and they're scorched, give it a second for the damage over time to finish the kill for you instead of trying to immediately finish the enemy with your weapon, because then you're using your weapon to work against knock them down, right? If your weapon gets the kill on a target that has been scorched by your throwing knife, then your weapon kill is going to override the charged melee kill, and you're wasting knock them down, you're not getting your melee back. So that is one thing to consider. I'm also using Gambler's Dodge with this, so that way I can refund both my knives. Oftentimes I will go up to like a champion or a really beefy target or a boss. You know, I know that this is just the legendary campaign. There's not, the targets aren't as threatening as doing this like on the solo master version of this. But what I like to do is I can get close to a beefy target, throw two knives. That's going to set off an ignition. I don't necessarily intend on killing the major or whatever beefy target with the first ignition, but I can just dodge right away after throwing both knives, and then I'll have two knives back, which means I can instantly set off a second ignition. But mainly I'm using that major as kind of like an ignition beacon for an area of effect on, you know, to clear out all the ads that are around that target. Sometimes it's just to straight up eliminate the target, right? Because I can save on heavy ammo. If I can safely get up close to the target and just double knife trick it 2 times in a row for 2 ignitions plus all that scorch, you know, I could pretty much take out the target and I didn't have to waste any heavy at all. So you can kind of treat double knife trick like using heavy ammo because of the burst damage from the ignition, not just the damage over time from the scorch. But so, and what else, the other thing that I'm doing with my knife trick is I'm creating Firesprites, and I don't. This new edition of Firesprites that came with the edition of Lightfall and Season of Defiance, we got the 2 new fragments. One of them is called Ember of Mercy. Also, we got some reworks to some of the other fragments, but basically with Ember of Mercy, if I pick up a Firesprite, I get restoration. And we all know restoration is pretty powerful. It's just straight up healing over time for X amount of seconds. I can't remember exactly what it is, like how much restoration you get with Ember of Mercy. But restoration is restoration. So, you know, if I'm in a group of ads and there's a fire sprite that I can just make on command by killing something with my knife trick, then I've got, you know, I'm good. Like I don't have to worry too much. But I am using a healing grenade as well, just for extra backup, because if there isn't a fire sprite nearby, if I can't proc healing from that, then, you know, I've pretty much always got a healing grenade on demand. But the other, so how am I making the fire sprites, right? So Ember of Mercy is giving me restoration for picking up fire sprites, but I need some way to make fire sprites. And so that got added to a couple of fragments, one of which is when you kill enemies with your super, might be Ember of Combustion, your super kills create fire sprites, right, off of dead targets, which isn't really like a reliable fragment to really build into, but I think it's Ember of Searing, which gives you +10 restoration, and it gives you melee energy from defeating scorched targets. It's always been a fragment since Solar 3.0 came out, and it's one that I use on quite a few builds. But just this season, it was added that it would also create Firesprites, so it's just all around a better fragment now. Because even if you're not like using Ember of Mercy or any of the seasonal artifact mods, which I'm not for this series that I'm doing, there's no seasonal artifacts. But I'm just saying, if you were using like the Solar Surge artifact mod, then you get armor charge from picking up Firesprites. I'm not doing that. In this build, I am making it so that with Ember of Mercy, I'm picking up Firesprites. I'm getting an additional benefit of restoration. But even if I wasn't using that at base, it's still good to pick up Firesprites because it's giving you free grenade energy. Right, so like each of the subclasses has this type of Elemental Well 2.0 thing that it drops. Solar is Firesprites, which gives you grenade energy. Void is Void Breaches, which give you class ability energy. Stasis is the same as it always was, where shards give you melee energy, and I think they're going to be making it so that tangles or shooting tangles in the future is going to give you some kind of benefit. I can't remember. But anyway, so the other aspect that I'm using after Knock 'em Down is on your mark, and it's pretty much the go-to aspect of choice because it gives you 3 fragment slots, which is amazing. But it also gives you increased reload speed. Like basically, if you get precision kills or if you just straight up dodge, you're going to get maximum stacks of on your mark, which just basically gives you like better gun feel all around. Quicker reload speed, better handling, movement while using those guns is just like, you just feel like it just feels really good. It's really good gunplay. And so because we have this aspect on your mark, there's not really any need for marksman's dodge to reload your weapons automatically. I'd much rather have my dodge go to, like I said, gambler's dodge, where I can ensure, it's just another way for me to ensure that I have uptime on my knife tricks. So part of this run that I'm doing here for this build, I was experimenting with the Firesprites. Prior to these being introduced into Solar 3.0, I can't remember what. I think I would use the fragment that gives you class ability energy from scorching targets or defeating scorched targets, which means I could just dodge more and get more knife tricks, basically, and probably extend the duration of restoration or radiant. But another good option to use if you don't feel like making Firesprites and basically using 2 fragments to play off of them, you could just go with Ember of Empyrean instead. Which, if you can get restoration and radiant going, then Ember of Empyrean is pretty much the best fragment to maintain uptime on those. Like, you can refresh the timer over and over and over again just by getting solar ability kills or solar weapon kills with it. It's basically Devour for solar. You know, obviously Devour is different in the sense that Devour is going to fully heal you on kills. It's going to reset the Devour timer, and it's going to give you grenade energy on kills. While with Ember of Empyrean, it's the same thing, except it's if you're already radiant and getting restoration on a timer, say 8 seconds, and you kill something within those 8 seconds, it's gonna refresh the timer to another 8 seconds, so you can keep that chain going. I believe I was using Ember of Empyrean on my Synthesept Bonk type build, which was part 1 of this series, so you can check that out. But that might even be better to use here than the Firesprite thing. I mainly just wanted to kind of test it out, see how it works. I'm not saying you shouldn't use it. Like, Firesprites are pretty good, but I think maybe overall it would just be a little bit more optimal to go without Ember of Mercy and just use Ember of Empyrean. And then maybe even not use Ember of Searing either, because you don't really need to get melee energy from defeating scorched targets when you've already got knock 'em down and gambler's dodge refreshing your knife tricks. So I don't really need melee energy. So basically for this build, you know, there's 2 fragments that were up in the air: Ember of Searing, Ember of Mercy. And if I had to redo, if I had to tweak this build in any way, I would swap those 2 out for Ember of Empyrean. And then probably another fragment that either extends the duration of restoration and radiant, or gives me more dodge energy or something like that. Might be a little bit better, but this still works. So, and then as far as the weapons I'm using Parasite, which is probably my favorite exotic weapon in the game, just because, I mean, it's like a nuke cannon, and I've probably got a little bit of sentimental attachment to it because I basically got back into Destiny with the release of Witch Queen, and Parasite was the kind of endgame exotic that you would get for beating the mission or doing a side mission after the campaign. And there's a bunch of lore attached to it, with Invalid the Disciple and all that as well. So it's kind of an interesting weapon, but I just think it looks cool, and I like the mechanic of, well, I'll explain it, because if you haven't used Parasite or you don't have it unlocked yet, it's definitely worth your time. All you gotta do, the exotic trait for the weapon is Worm's Hunger times 20. And so what that does is it gives you, I couldn't even tell you how much more damage than it does at base, but it is a absolutely huge damage buff. It's pretty much the highest burst damage heavy weapon in the game. Like, one shot does the most more damage than anything, right? The drawback is reload speed. Once you waste the Worm's Hunger times 20, then you got to build it back up. So how do you get stacks of Worm's Hunger? That's what the damage buff is. If you have Worm's Hunger times 20, that is the max. And you build that up passively just by getting kills with other weapons. So Parasite can be stowed, you know, for a good majority of the game. You're running around killing stuff with whatever abilities, weapons, doesn't matter. Once you kill a few things, just swap over to Parasite and you could see how much Worm's Hunger is built up. Once you have times 20, you have the maximum damage, and then you could just go to town and nuke a whole area or a single target. It's got like a huge blast radius on it, so even if you want to use it without the Worm's Hunger stacks built up just for ad clear, you could do that, but it's not the best on ammo economy because you get like 6 grenades with it, maybe 7. And so it's not something you want to use like over and over for ad clear. But if you have a bunch of ammo and you're not afraid about wasting your Worm's Hunger, yeah, go ahead and use it on a pile of ads, because it's with the blast radius, you're pretty much gonna annihilate everything within the radius. In fact, on one of the opening clips of this video, I had Radiant from double knife tricking the Major Ogre, and I had Solar Surge ×2 because I had 2 copies of the Solar Surge mod on my leg piece for an extra 15 or 17% damage. Right, most you can stack 3 copies of the Solar Surge weapon mods on your leg piece. That'll give you a 22% damage buff, while 2 copies is 17 and 1 copy is 10. So it's diminishing returns, right? So if you want to be the most efficient, you just go with 1 copy and kind of spread out your surge mods, or use like innervation or something, so that orbs give you some other benefit other than just weapon damage. But I really wanted to just kind of like, for the hell of it, just kind of max out the damage of Parasite. If I really wanted to, I would have gone 3 copies, but 2 copies was plenty. So I'm getting 17% from that, and then the Worm's Hunger ×20 is probably like 200-300% more damage than normal. And I was Radiant, and Radiant is a 25% damage buff for X amount of seconds. Usually it's 8 seconds at base. So multiplicatively, I had Radiant going on, plus Solar Surge ×2, which was the solar weapon buff, or solar weapon boost, I think it says, ×2 on your screen. Yeah, it's like I have it on my screen right now, solar weapon boost ×2, right, because I have armor charge, plus Radiant. Plus Worm's Hunger ×20, and from like a mile away, there was 2 majors spread out, like they were like 20 feet apart, and that one shot was able to, with the size of the blast radius, take out both of those majors. So it's pretty good. It's also very good, like in previous seasons, if you didn't have, like, if there was unstoppables in your mission and you didn't have a weapon to stun the unstoppable, you could use the burst damage of Parasite to pretty much take care of unstunned unstoppables. It was pretty much that good. And then as far as my other weapons going, I'm using Callus Mini Tool, which is my favorite solar SMG by far, because I've got this crafted with Incandescent and Threat Detector. Lately I've been contemplating taking Threat Detector off of it though, and then just putting on Unrelenting, because I do find with Gunslinger it is a little bit of a squishy class to play. It's not like, for the type of style that this build is, it's a weaker build than like a less survivable build than the Synthoset Bonk Titan, because with Bonk Titan, every time you throw your hammer and pick it up, you're getting Cure. And anything that you kill creates a sunspot that if you just stand in the sunspot, you're constantly getting Restoration. It's a little bit more work on Gunslinger to keep your healing going. So like in this run, for example, I have to pick up a Fire Sprite to get Restoration. When I throw my knife trick, I'm not getting any immediate benefit, right? Because I can't pick my knife trick back up and get Cure from it like I could with a throwing hammer. So I definitely crush more on my healing grenade with this build than I do with Syntheseps. But for situations like that, and if you're the type that likes to do like solo master weekly stuff or lost sectors, nightfalls, then having unrelenting on a weapon is just another way to heal for free. So I may do that, but yeah, anyway, so Incandescent plays into the subclass as well. Makes more Firesprites for me, can help set off ignitions, and then I'm using a basic scout for long-range engagements, which is Tears of Contrition with explosive. And then for stat distribution, tier 10 mobility, tier 10 resilience, tier 7 discipline with the font mod, right? It's a healing grenade, so I'm not crutching on it as much as other grenade builds. And then I'm producing Orbs of Power from Heavy Handed. I have Impact Induction, which is also aiding me by giving me grenade energy on melee kills. You know, not just the Firesprites, but also Impact Induction on my arms. Heavy Handed is key. And I'm getting more super energy as well from the mod where you kill stuff with your charged melee, you get super energy. So anyway, that's pretty much it for the build, and let me get on to the next video and I'll get it to you. I will see you then. Take care.